Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sew with Sarah. You guys will have to excuse my attire this week. It's Casual Friday. I couldn't bring myself to not wear a sweatshirt today. So this week on Sew with Sarah, we're going to finish up the sample for our Bouquet of Hearts wall hanging that we started last week. So last week we stitched out the top block, I believe it was, together, and then this week we're going to stitch out a border block and talk about joining those blocks together and give you some techniques to get your blocks to line up perfectly every time. So let's jump right into it. We're going to dive into our border blocks first, and then I'll stay at the machine after we trim our block up and we'll pin those together. We're going to stitch out our border block, which is one of our last blocks to stitch for this Bouquet of Hearts sample. And I already did the first step, which was hoop our battleizer, put water-soluble thread in the needle, and sew the placement stitch. I'm going to stitch 2 border blocks at one time, so I have 2 placement stitches here. And our second step is the optional wool batting that we're not using for this particular wall hanging. So we'll just skip that, move on to our third step. We still have the water-soluble thread in the needle, and now we will take our border fabric and align that over our placement stitches. Just like last week, I like to lift up on that fabric and check the corners to make sure everything is covered. And with that water-soluble thread, we'll sew the tack down. After we tack down our border fabric, we're going to stitch the kind of meandering ribbon that runs along the side of the border blocks. You'll just want a light thread and a little bit darker thread for these steps. So step 4, we're going to use the lighter thread and we'll sew that, and then we'll switch to the darker thread in the needle and stitch that. And now we're switching over to our darker thread for step 5. We're already on our last step for our border block, and I have a thread in the needle that matches our fabric. We're just going to sew some simple quilting onto the remainder of the border blocks. So now that we're done with all our blocks, we're going to work on joining them, and we'll give you some pinning techniques that you can use. So I need to join these blocks in a row, and I'm going to start with my right hand side. I'll put my blocks right side together, and then with our pin we're going to go straight through this corner right here, that corner point, and then we're going to go straight through the matching corner point on our other block. I'll keep that pin straight through those 2 blocks and do the same thing to our other corner. So again, I'm going straight through the matching corner points on both sides. Now that I have those straight through the block, I'm going to go in through the seam allowance and then down into the block with my pin. So we'll do the other side the same way. So in through the seam allowance and then down into the block. And now that I have, these 2 blocks don't have many match points, so now that I have my 2 corners matched, I'm going to pull out these other pins that I have that are going straight through, and we'll just sew right along that basting stitch. Alrighty, So now we have these two blocks joined together, and I'm going to use that same pinning technique for the other block that's in this row. We'll just highlight that really quickly again. So again, our blocks are right side together, and our two match points are these corners. So I'm going to go straight through that corner point on both of our blocks. Same thing on the other corner. Now that I've got both pins straight through, I'll take a third pin and go in through the seam allowance and down into the block. And after I've done that, I'll remove the pins that go straight through, and then again, just sew right along that basting stitch. All right, and here's this row. And so I'll just press the seams to one side, and then we'll continue joining our other rows, alternating the direction in which we press our seams. Okay, so that was pretty quick. Stitching out the border blocks is pretty quick. You know, all these blocks are pretty quick, and they're really cute. I love the ribbon detail that's winding along the border blocks, and those tips and tricks for how you pin your blocks, I find they work really well for me, so I hope you'll give them a try and let us know how those work for you. After we joined our blocks together, I then joined the rows together. We'll just do a quick little rundown of how to finish out your wall hanging. These are in detailed, your written instructions, but I joined my blocks together, and then I added our backing fabric. And to add the backing fabric, I just put wrong sides together. So wrong side of the backing fabric to the back side of our blocks. And then I pin avoiding seams, and then with an elongated serpentine stitch and a monofilament thread in the needle. We use Monopoly by Superior Threads. You'll put this in the needle, use that elongated serpentine stitch to stitch in the ditch. It lays nice and flat after you do that, as well as secures the back on. And then you just add your binding. So it's pretty simple. I hope that helps you guys, any of these tips that you picked up. And I gotta ask you, you gotta let us know in the comments, do you like this colorway or this colorway? I should say that colorway. So this colorway or that colorway for the Bouquet of Hearts wall hanging. So the more pink one or the more jewel toned and darker colors. You got to let us know in the comments, which way would you make your Bouquet of Hearts? And thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll see you next week.